Good hello, welcome to Onion Skin. This is 3D in Toon Boom Harmony, bit of a crash course on everything about moving 3D elements around. This is going to be a bit more long-winded, quite a lot of things to cover. So I'm going to dive right into it and just sort of show you around what we can do with 3D in Toon Boom Harmony. Now, first and most important thing is at the moment, these are all just raw layers. I'm going to need to have a peg on each one. Very important, always animate on pegs. Control-Shift-P, add a peg on everything. Now, the transform tool, as you probably know, is sort of like your Swiss Army knife. It moves things around left to right, up and down, rotates scales, etc. But it can also move things forwards and backwards. And that's done by pressing Alt up and Alt down. So you notice that's skipping all the way behind absolutely everything there. Down, down, up, down, down. And what that's doing is pushing things physically forwards or backwards in three-dimensional space. Best way to remember it is Alt up and down is up is pushing things away from you, whereas down is pulling things back towards you again. Now, because everything is a two-dimensional shape, it only needs to push things away an infinitesimal amount. It's like 0.001 in Z space. So X is left and right, Y is up and down, Z is forwards and backwards. So if I go over to layer properties here, you can indeed see the X, Y, and Z. So if I move this around, you can see that it's gone to 17 and 13 east and up. If I press up and down with the Alt key now, keep your eye down here on position Z, and you'll notice that it has gone 0.001 back. And if I keep doing that, it nudges it back by 0.00B, and then bring it back forwards again, and we see it hits 0 and then changes into F. So this is the primary way that 3D is used throughout Harmony, just by moving things tiny amounts in order to change the layering on the fly. That's its main use. So if you've got a character with their arms behind their body and then it moves to being in front of the body, Alt up and down changes layering on the fly. So you're literally animating things in 3D space when you want to change layering by changing it a tiny bit. Because everything is 2D, everything is a paper thin, it doesn't need to move very far at all in order for it to push itself in front or behind its neighbors. It's very important that it's a super tiny amount, because if it came really far forwards, then perspective would start to come into play, right? So things that are closer to us will appear bigger than they were before, or they will move faster left or right than they did before. Now, usually you don't want that, but sometimes you do. Let's start to explore such a feature. We want a couple of extra windows here, because we're always looking through the camera view by default. Go up to Windows and go get the top view, the side view, and the perspective view. I've got them set up in different windows like this, so I can have all three open and see what I'm looking at. If I scroll out, I can see a 3D plane on the bottom of the floor, and if I hold Control and Alt, but if I hold those down, you can see me panning around in 3D space, and I can see how everything is constructed in this way. Meanwhile, if I look at the top and the side views, you can see this sort of triangle shape with a line going straight through the middle. This line is our drawings all stacked up in, it's 2D. There is nothing really to see there. But if I were to zoom really far in, I'll grab one of these and push it backwards in 3D space with Alt up again. And let me just show you how tiny the amount is. There it is. You see that? So if I push it up and down, see that? So it's moving this tiny amount, and that's all that matters. You might also notice as I'm doing this that there's this little cheat sheet here of my different layers, and as it goes backwards, it sort of resets the order. So this is a nice little guide to being able to see how things are stacked up forwards to backwards. So the bottom is the one that is closest to us. The one at the top is the one furthest away. So once again, think of this as a bird's eye view, pushing things away, pulling things towards us. The one closest towards us is the one closest towards the bottom. This can become particularly useful if you have like a rigged character and things are starting to get pretty messy when you're just shuffling lots of parts around. So much so to the point that the way you actually have your layers set up just becomes irrelevant, right? Because things are scattered all over the place in 3D. Looking at layers is just becoming confusing. So you turn your attention to here instead to be able to see how they are layered. Everything is sitting on 0, so it does show me the true layer order instead at that point. Continuing to look at the top and the side view, we also have this triangle shape. This is the camera. So anything that is inside this triangle is what we will see on our screen. If I move this to the left, you can see the yellow bar there. As soon as it exits the yellow triangle, you can see that is when it has exited our camera view and is no longer visible. I'd like to direct your attention now to the advanced animation tools, position, rotation, scale, these ones here. If I choose the position one, we get a more advanced looking position tool. This is great because it lets me click anywhere on the screen and it will still grab the currently selected layer, so I don't have to be quite so careful. And you'll also notice that it has green and red arrows indicating the X and Y coordinates. And from the top view, you'll see that I have a blue one indicating Z, forwards and backwards. So I can grab this here and bring it forwards, and I can take it further away. And you'll notice here that perspective is indeed coming into play. As it gets closer to the screen, it looks like it's getting bigger. Of course, it's not actually getting bigger, it's just coming physically closer towards us. This is further emphasized from the perspective view. We can see clearly here that nothing is changing size. So if we want to set up some sort of parallax effect here, this could become pretty tricky, right? Because I would have to pull this forwards and then scale it back down again in order to try and cancel out that illusion. But fortunately, there's a tool that does this for us. It's the fifth one along in these tools. It's the two cubes with the rounded arrow on it, not to be confused with the two squares with the arrow on it. This is the maintain size tool, and it's basically both. You can see it only has the blue axis for Z, and it will move things towards us or further away while also scaling the size at the same time. Therefore, cancelling each other out. Do you see that? This is confusing for some because from the camera view's perspective, it looks like literally nothing's happening, but that's the point. Notice from the top and the side view that it is shrinking as it gets closer to the point of the camera view. It's scaling itself in real time so that we don't have to worry about rescaling things, but we can increase or decrease the intensity of our perspective. So let me show you again from the perspective view. We can see that it is shrinking right down, all getting really big. All the way from the camera view, it looks like nothing's happening at all. So that's what we're going to set up now. I'm going to work down through each one of my peg layers here and push and pull them in 3D space using the maintain size tool. So I'm going to pull this one a little bit forwards, leave the foreground where it is, and each set of mountains are going to go progressively further and further back from the ones that preceded them. I'm going to start with the sky, which is going to be so far back that it's not going to really affect anything. The clouds will be pretty well just in front of that. Volcano layer about midway. And mountains like so. There we are. So we can see each layer sort of stacked like that. If I go to the perspective view now, we can see that they are indeed all layered up very nice. So now let's take advantage of this. I'm going to need a camera layer. I can do this in the node view, or I can go to the plus symbol and choose camera. Make sure that this camera also has a peg on it. Put a keyframe on that first frame for the camera. And now when I use the regular position tool, notice that the bounding box of my camera itself is yellow. That means it is indeed selected. And as I click and move around the screen, it's going to be moving my camera. There we go, look at that. Quite a powerful result. And remember the illusion that we're pulling off here. None of these layers themselves are actually moving. We can see back here in the top and side view still that the layers themselves are staying put, and it's the representation of our camera that is moving. Likewise, if I use the top and side views to push the camera forwards, then we can really start to adventure the depths of our scene. Now we can move around the back of this mountain and come back around the other side. Some layers, however, we probably don't want to be affecting quite as heavily as others, or even at all. Say the sky, for instance. If I move too far to the left, our sky edge starts to enter the scene, and that's no good at all. Fortunately, I can take the sky, and probably even the cloud peg here too, and put it underneath the camera's peg. What this has done has nested the clouds and sky inside the camera peg itself. In the nodes view, it now looks like this. See how the camera's peg is parented to both of these? So now when I move the camera around, it's going to bring the sky and the clouds with us wherever we may go. Which makes sense, as the sky itself doesn't get bigger or smaller. One last trick, a compositing trick I would like to emphasize on this example, is the focus node. The focus node comes out of a peg that's shared by the camera, like this, and it will blur anything that isn't sitting at 0. So if I go into the render view now, you can see the ground is in focus and yet nothing else is. If I were to pull away from the scene, you can see the window is in focus. etc., etc. As I animate the camera moving forwards, this is the result we get. And in layer properties, the intensity of that focus, like how narrow its field of vision is, can be edited in the edit curve area here. The more level this line is to 0, the less intense the effect will be. So for example, I can still have things be very blurry when they're in the distance, but as long as the arc is shallow at the beginning and steep at the end, it's not really going to kick into high gear until something is really far away. So you can see these ones are quite subtle now, but the volcano and clouds, they're basically gone.
And would you believe that's all we've got time for? So keep an eye out. There is going to be a second part. There's plenty more to talk about, which should be ready in a couple of weeks from the time of upload. Meanwhile, the working file from this demonstration and all of the other silly little animated bits, they're all going to be available on Patreon, including that one of the UFO, which I spent way too much time on. So much time that I thought it would be nice to include a bonus secret video documenting the process of that. So all those should be getting uploaded periodically over the following week or so. As always, all the socials, including the Discord server, is in the description. If yourself, your studio or class are interested in some private classes, please do get in touch via some kind of DMs or email, which is also in the description. We can suss out some availabilities, see if we can't make that happen. Thanks again. Hope you learned something, and I should see you next week.